study the footnotes, and they just continued 1, 2, 3, 4. In the end, there were more than 20 mistakes. No such paragraphs exist. And then there's a quote here of 4 or 5 lines, which is completely fictitious.
So a hallucination is when a model produces output that is potentially incorrect, incomplete. Lawyers are producing and submitting evidence or documents that contain false quotes, false citations, false cases.
There's a $97,000 mistake sitting in the Australian government's accounting system right now, and it represents something far more concerning than just wasted taxpayer money. A major consulting firm submitted a report to the federal government, a report that cost $440,000 and was supposed to guide critical policy decisions affecting welfare recipients across the nation. The document looked professional. It had proper formatting, extensive citations, references to legal cases, and quotes from respected judges and academics. But when a law lecturer at Sydney University started reading it carefully, something felt wrong.
Chris Rudge was reviewing the document line by line when he noticed the footnotes seemed odd. He started checking them. 1 error, then 2, then 3. By the time he finished his analysis, he'd identified more than 20 distinct fabrications. Fake book titles attributed to real academics, court cases that never existed, quotes from judges that were completely invented, legal citations pointing to non-existent documents, and speeches attributed to the wrong people entirely. This wasn't human error or sloppy research. This was artificial intelligence hallucinating references, and a consulting firm, Deloitte, one of the largest and most respected in the world, had submitted it to the government without catching the mistakes. The report was commissioned to review Australia's welfare compliance system following the robo-debt scandal, in which the previous government unlawfully pursued welfare recipients for alleged overpayments. The stakes were enormous. Policy decisions affecting vulnerable citizens would be based on this analysis, and significant portions of it were fabricated by AI. What follows is the story of how this happened, what it reveals about the current state of AI-generated content, and why this case represents a much larger problem that extends far beyond one expensive report. The lecturer who caught what others missed. Chris Rudge, a law lecturer at Sydney University, was doing what academics do, carefully reviewing a document relevant to his area of expertise. The Deloitte report on welfare compliance fell within his research focus, so he approached it with the detailed attention scholars bring to peer review. As he worked through the document, he began checking footnotes, those small numbered references that ground claims in verifiable sources, and that's when the problems became apparent. "I just continued to study the footnotes, and they just continued," Rudge later explained. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the end, there were more than 20 mistakes. But these weren't minor citation formatting errors or incorrect page numbers. These were fundamental fabrications. Rudge recognized many of the names referenced because they were colleagues in his field. He knew their work, and he immediately spotted books attributed to them that simply didn't exist. "As soon as I saw that books were attributed to my colleagues that I'd never heard of, I quickly concluded that they were fabricated," he said. Among the specific errors Rudge identified, the report incorrectly referenced a key federal court case and misquoted the presiding judge with language that never appeared in the actual ruling. Another judge's name was wrong entirely. The report attributed a speech to Justice Natalie Quace Perry, when the actual judge's first name is Melissa, and the speech cited doesn't exist in any form. Legal experts reviewing the document found completely fictitious quotes spanning multiple lines, presented as if they were direct citations from authoritative sources. The academic whose fake book appeared. One of the academics incorrectly cited in the report was law professor Lisa Burton Crawford. She holds her actual book in her hands when discussing what happened, the rule of law and the Australian Constitution. But the Deloitte report attributed a completely different book to her. The Rule of Law and Administrative Justice in the Welfare State, a Study of Centrelink. "Does that book exist?" an interviewer asked. "No," Burton Crawford confirmed. "So it's a fake book?" "Yes, I've never written a book with that title. This is precisely what AI researchers call a hallucination, when machine learning models produce output that is incorrect, incomplete, or unexpected. In this case, the AI generated citations to documents that don't exist anywhere in reality. The model likely saw Burton Crawford's name associated with administrative law topics and welfare policy in its training data, then confidently created a plausible-sounding book title that combined those themes. To a casual reader, the citation looks legitimate. It has an author name, a specific title, and thematic relevance. Only someone familiar with the actual academic literature in that field would recognize it as fiction. The company that charged nearly $500,000. Deloitte Australia is not a small operation struggling with quality control. The firm reported revenue of $2.5 billion this year and has been awarded 48 new government contracts worth a combined $57.8 million. This is a massive, sophisticated consulting operation with extensive resources and established quality assurance processes. Yet they submitted a report to the federal government containing more than 20 fabricated references without apparently catching any of them before delivery. After Chris Rudge went public with his findings in the Australian Financial Review, the government demanded Deloitte correct the document. In the revised version issued the following week, Deloitte finally revealed what had happened. They had used artificial intelligence from Microsoft's Azure platform, which was licensed through the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, to generate portions of the report. What percentage of the report was AI generated? Deloitte won't say. How did AI generated content get through their internal review processes? The company declined to explain. What specific quality assurance measures failed? No details provided. The firm would only state that the matter has been resolved directly with the client and eventually agreed to a partial refund of $97,000, roughly 22% of the original contract value. The government officials who aren't satisfied. During Senate estimates hearings, government officials publicly criticized Deloitte's work and announced new measures to ensure consulting firms declare their use of AI and maintain proper quality standards. This is a clearly unacceptable act from a consulting firm, one official stated. This case highlights that we need to always be ensuring that departmental processes deal with that sort of emerging technology. Another official was more blunt. We should not be receiving work that has glaring errors in footnotes and sources. My people should not be double-checking a third-party provider's footnotes. We expect them to have quality assurance processes that will pick those things up. Chris Rudge noted something else that troubled him. I am struck by the lack of any apology to us, referring to the academics whose work was misrepresented and whose professional reputations were implicated in fabricated citations. The partial refund also raised questions about accountability. I think plenty of Australians out there are wondering why there hasn't been a full refund in view of this very poor quality work, one observer noted. Government officials defended accepting partial payment rather than demanding full reimbursement. We felt that the substantial work done there that we had interrogated was fair and reasonable to pay for those deliverables, but the quality of the final report was not, which is why we asked for the final installment to be repaid. The bigger question, nobody can answer. This case raises a concern that extends far beyond one expensive consulting report. In an age of AI-generated content, how can anyone know what's true? We're currently living in what some researchers call the era of AI slop, content that looks legitimate but contains subtle or not-so-subtle fabrications that are difficult to detect without extensive fact-checking, and the problem is spreading across multiple domains simultaneously. We're seeing this in academic writing, explains one AI researcher. We're seeing this in the reviews of academic papers. We're also seeing this in the legal industry where some lawyers are producing and submitting evidence or documents that contain false quotes, false citations, false cases, and that's really scary. The implications are genuinely troubling. If AI-generated fabrications become common enough, society might end up making consequential decisions based on incorrect information that was hallucinated by machine learning models, and detection is extremely difficult. It's really difficult to look at a report, look at a paper, and know whether or not it's been AI-generated, the researcher notes. There are tools out there that claim they can, but their efficacy and how well they work is really highly debated. Unlike human-written content, which typically has tells like inconsistent writing style or factual errors that cluster in ways that suggest limited knowledge, AI-generated text can be uniformly confident and plausible sounding even when it's completely wrong. The fabricated book title attributed to Lisa Burton Crawford is a perfect example. It sounds exactly like something that should exist. The thematic elements are correct. The academic focus is appropriate. Only someone with specific expertise in that narrow field would know it's fiction. The context that makes this worse. The Deloitte report wasn't examining an abstract academic question. It was reviewing Australia's welfare compliance system following the robo-debt scandal. one of the most significant governmental failures in recent Australian history, in which automated debt recovery systems incorrectly pursued thousands of welfare recipients for alleged overpayments they didn't actually owe. The human cost was enormous. People faced financial hardship from incorrect debt assessments. Some individuals experienced severe psychological distress from aggressive collection practices for debts they never incurred. The scandal prompted a Royal Commission investigation and ultimately contributed to the government changing hands. Policy recommendations based on this review would directly affect vulnerable populations who depend on the welfare system. Getting the analysis right mattered profoundly, not just academically, but in terms of real human consequences for real people. And significant portions of it were apparently generated by AI and submitted without adequate human verification. This also raises broader questions about why governments increasingly rely on private consulting firms rather than public service expertise for critical policy work. A government official noted that anyone paying that much money for a report of this kind that is going to be relied upon in formulating policy would expect that there was a significant degree of human oversight. The concern is that government officials who receive these reports and use them to guide policy decisions might not detect errors and simply take it at face value, assuming the consulting firm has done proper verification. So here's where this situation actually stands. One of the world's largest consulting firms submitted a $440,000 report to the Australian government containing more than 20 fabricated citations, invented book titles, non-existent court cases, and fictitious quotes from judges. The firm eventually revealed they'd used AI to generate content, but won't specify how much of the report was machine-generated, or explain how their quality control processes failed so comprehensively. They agreed to a partial refund of $97,000, less than a quarter of the contract value, and the government accepted that settlement despite the severity of the errors. The academics whose work was misrepresented received no apology. The consulting firm faced no apparent penalties beyond the partial refund, and the government now has a corrected version of a report whose credibility has been fundamentally compromised. But the real story isn't just about one expensive mistake. It's about what this reveals for a future where AI-generated content becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish from human-created work. When machine learning models can produce plausible-sounding citations to non-existent sources, confident assertions based on fabricated evidence, and professional-looking documents that contain subtle but significant errors, how does society maintain shared understanding of truth? The answer isn't clear. Detection tools exist, but remain unreliable. Human fact-checking is time-consuming and expensive, precisely why organizations turn to AI in the first place. And the incentive structures don't favor careful verification when speed and cost reduction drive decision-making. For now, this case serves as a warning about the risks of over-reliance on AI-generated content, particularly for high-stakes work where accuracy matters profoundly. Whether that warning gets heeded broadly enough to prevent similar incidents remains an open question.
The answer isn't clear. Detection tools exist but remain unreliable. Human fact-checking is time-consuming and expensive, precisely why organizations turn to AI in the first place. And the incentive structures don't favor careful verification when speed and cost reduction drive decision-making. For now, this case serves as a warning about the risks of over-reliance on AI-generated content, particularly for high-stakes work where accuracy matters profoundly. Whether that warning gets heeded broadly enough to prevent similar incidents remains an open question.